Hello, everybody. Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signor, and today we're talking Breaking Bad, El Camino. That's right. Netflix has been working in secret with Vince Gilligan, who has been making a feature-length, 2-hour Breaking Bad movie starring Jesse Pinkman himself. I am very excited and intrigued by this. Now, for those of you who haven't seen Breaking Bad, you might want to come back after you catch up, or if you don't care about spoilers, I am going to talk about the finale of Breaking Bad and what this all means, where we are in the Breaking Bad universe leading up to this film, what we know about this film, and my feelings on it all. So that's what this video is in for. Before I get to it, though, please be sure to subscribe, hit that subscription button and the little notification bell so you get notified of future videos. Thank you so much. All right, getting to this topic of Breaking Bad, the big news today, obviously this movie has a teaser. It's been talked about, but the cool thing today was that they announced a limited theatrical release. This will be featured in cinemas around mostly independent theaters throughout the fall, the day before it streams on Netflix. It's going to be on October 11th on the service at midnight, but there will be screenings held between the 11th and 13th in 68 cities, including New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then will air on AMC, the network that originally broadcast Breaking Bad, early next year. As for those of you who don't know, Camino, El Camino, that's the name of the car that Jesse drives at the end of the finale when he's smiling and happy to be free. That's what they're referring to. This film really does pick up directly after the finale, where he drives off. And in the wake of this dramatic escape from captivity, Jesse must come to terms with his past in order to forge some kind of future. Along with Aaron Paul, who played Jesse, El Camino will feature over 10 different characters from the original series, though Vince Gilligan only will name 2 of them, his dim-witted associates and periodic coworkers, Badger and Skinny Pete. Skinny Pete was in the trailer. So he talked about, Aaron Paul talked about in this article about how he was surprised to get a call. Aaron Paul was like, I thought it was over, but said he would follow Vince into a fire. That's how much I trust this man, and it was and what it was like returning to the role of Jesse. It was so easy for me to jump into Jesse, where he is at mentally, emotionally, because I lived and breathed everything he went through and then some, and honestly, it felt like part of me had gone through it as well. All I had to do was just memorize the words and then play them out when he yelled action. They did a bigger piece in Hollywood Reporter where they talk about sort of the pressure of doing this and how they did the film in total secrecy, and I implore you check it out. Look up this article in Hollywood Reporter, but talking about how they specifically shot this and the returning to it, he talks about how he was really nervous to come back and do this story. He started talking about this concept of revisiting Jesse before he even finished making Breaking Bad, or at least the story that he uses in El Camino, and he didn't really tell anybody about it because he didn't really know what to do with it. But I started thinking to myself, what happened to Jesse? You see him driving away, and in my mind, he went off to a happy ending. But as the years progressed, I thought, what did that ending, let's just call it an ending, neither happy nor sad, what did it look like? It was planning events in 2018 with the 10th anniversary, where he first told sort of his inner circle about revisiting. And they were all very excited, obviously, as producers and stuff. And he realized that at first it might be a 5-minute short, and then went in to say, well, no, I have a lot more to say about this, and it's turned into a feature-length film. This is the first film that Vince Gilligan has directed. He wrote Home Fries, Wilder Napalm, but this is his first feature. He directed episodes of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and X-Files, all shows he worked on. But he said this budget apparently was the largest he's ever worked with. He clearly enjoyed that and wants to tell more stories on this. He also goes on the article talking about how writing Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and having the writer's room to be able to help him beat out story beats was just obviously something he got very used to. And then to go back, and he talks about it as a writer, when you're a screenwriter, and anybody out there who's writing can probably relate to this. When you're writing, you have to put deadlines on yourself. You have to be able to know when you need to stop or when you need to finish. And sometimes when you write yourself, you just keep thinking, you never want to actually write an ending. And he always had that problem. It took the network TV schedule to really ingrain in him a way to write and actually finish, which some writers really need to learn. And so now to have gotten used to that for so many years doing TV, to go back and have to write a film, freely like he was able to do with El Camino, he really enjoyed it, but also realized he had, new challenges he had to overcome. And it's a really good point when you're writing that, to when you're writing in the writer's room of a show and you have those deadlines of delivering episodic television, it's a lot different from a film. So it'll be very interesting to see, what story Gilligan came up with to do this. In order to try and get a little bit of a gauge back, I wanted to go back and look at Vince actually made some comments to EW back in 2013 when the finale aired. Before I go to that, it's important. Let's recap. For those of you who don't even remember, how did Breaking Bad end? This show is one of my favorites. It's just an anti-hero. You're watching Walter White start out as a chemistry teacher who is, gets lung cancer, has never smoked a cigarette in his life, trying to provide for his family, and he slowly becomes this drug mastermind and becomes a really terrible person, making awful and awful choices. But they make him so likable in the beginning. You feel for him. He didn't get the stock from that thing he made, from that gray matter that he created, and all this stuff. You're always sort of rooting for him, even as he's sort of turning into this monster. And I think the beauty of the show is how Vince Gilligan and the show's writers and Bryan Cranston and everyone involved are able to make you feel for this terrible person. You understand why, and you watch him just lose control of everything and become the villain. And it's just a fascinating story. And so the show is obviously several seasons of lots of plot arcs, but Walter White becomes, Heisenberg, drug kingpin, and really does a lot of things. But in the final season, a lot of stuff starts to go wrong. And I think it really goes wrong where Hank dies. Obviously, Hank, his brother-in-law, figures out, and they're going against each other. And then Jesse, who has just really been and we're going to talk about this, Vince Gilligan's specific reasons of why we're continuing with Jesse. But Jesse and Walter's relationship is really the core of the show. And just poor Jesse, if you really think about it and look at it all. He's really just been run through the mill, and so many times he's tried to give up, and Walter never let him. And so that chemistry and that relationship between them, it'll be interesting to see Jesse now on his own. As we left with the show, Jesse was then ratted out, Walter, to his brother-in-law, was ready to sort of call him in. And then Jesse gets taken into by a rival drug dealing gang who happen to be Nazis. And they torture him. They keep him chained up for months. They're beating him up. This is right after his girlfriend gets shot and her boy dies. Jesse's just destroyed emotionally, physically through those last episodes. And so it's a real heartbreaking arc to watch as you're watching Jesse do this. And then meanwhile, Walter White's losing a lot of his own control, and he's about ready to give up near that last episode, the penultimate episode, until he sees his gray matter people, trying to devalue his involvement in there and what they created. And it really sets him off. And he goes and then sets up the laser scopes with Badger, and that's a great scene. And he scares them to pay what he's worth so his family can make sure they get the money. And then he goes to instill his acts of revenge, which we as the viewer, we're like, yes, we enjoy watching, even though it's just so effed up, we enjoy Heisenberg getting his revenge. We want to watch that. We want judgment, or not judgment. We want justice, and so that's what he gets. So the very part of that finale, aside from so many loose ends they tie up, and really characters beautifully tied up, all the plot threads, they go and they give us this moment where Walter sets up all these things with Lydia and the stevia, and then Todd, who's just like this evil version of Jesse. And he manages to wrap it all up in the scene where he guns down all of the Nazis, manages to save Jesse, even though he really was out there to sort of kill Jesse. He realizes in that moment, seeing Jesse all destroyed and beaten and Heisenberg, Walter White finally realizes, man, I have just messed up so many people's lives. One of the most, I think, and most important, best moments of that whole finale is when Walter finally goes to Skylar, and he's about to say, I did it for the family. And she's like, if you say that one more time, I will just kill you. And he finally says, no, I did it for me. I enjoyed it. I liked it. I mean, it's just such a touching moment. And then Skylar finally breaks down, and finally closure for her of this monster finally admitting it. And you just watch Walter's finally at wit's end, trying to come to atone for the wrongs he did, which he can't do in the amount of episode we have left. So then Walter at least goes and tries to mend what we can. He gets vengeance against these awful people of Lydia and the Nazis, who did deserve it too, and gets them all taken out. Saves Jesse, and then even Jesse's wants to kill him, and then doesn't want to be told what to do by Walter anymore. It's just this brilliant moment. He throws the gun and do it yourself. And then as he's leaving in that El Camino, you're like, what's going to happen? Is Walter actually going to let him go? And even Jesse's not sure. They look back at each other. And then Walter sort of nods, and Jesse sort of finally says, finally. And then, woo, he's free, drives off in the El Camino. And honestly, I thought it was a really, really, really strong finale. It really let things go. It wrapped the things up we need. Walter sort of manages to tie loose ends, but doesn't really make amends, but he at least tries his best to sort of do what he can do. Meanwhile, his family, who he's been doing all this for, is pretty destroyed. The scars there are brutal. Jesse's scar is brutal. but he manages to at least get money to them, so it seems. And then he goes to his meth lab to sort of delay longer and get away with everything, which is what Hank didn't want him to do, but he does, and then dies there. And it's sort of, with that song that plays, ironically, it's just, I think, a beautiful final chapter. And that's where we left. And so El Camino is going to pick up right after that with Jesse in the car and what happened. And so to try and get a little bit more gauge of what we think could happen, I want to go back and revisit this with you, because they made this article right after the finale, and I think it's telling to look back and read his words now, 5 years later, 6 years later, to see what he thought. And Gilligan says, ours is nothing if not a definitive ending to the series. He said... he also obviously wrote and directed that episode. I think plenty of people out there will have had different ending for the show in their mind's eye, and therefore we're bound to disappoint a certain number of folks. But I really think I can say with confidence that we made ourselves happy, and that this was not remotely a sure thing for that was not remotely a sure thing for the better part of a year. They didn't think they'd be happy writing the finale. I feel like the ending satisfies me, and that's something that I'm happy about. Which is important, because it's wrapping this stuff up. Game of Thrones, everyone's losing their mind. People weren't that upset about Breaking Bad. They were sad or disappointed because the show was over and character things minor, but this was a pretty well-received finale. And then they asked, did Walt have to die? We didn't feel an absolute need for Walt to expire at the end of the show. Our gut just told us it was right. We worked through a million different possibilities. They talk about how Jesse was going to kill him at one point, or Walt was going to kill him. They visioned a lot of different things, and if you go through this piece, you can see this. We found out over the years that the way we can please the majority of the audience most of the time is to tune out as much extraneous factors as possible and please the 8 of us in the room. If we can't make ourselves happy day in and out, we did a pretty good job at making viewers happy as well. And that's what did us good stead in the 6 years. With that in mind, we loved Jesse, and we just figured he had gotten in way over his head. When you think of it, he really didn't have a chance in the early days. Walt said, you either help me cook meth and sell it, or else I'll turn you into the DEA. So this poor kid, based on a couple of really bad decisions he made early on, has been paying through the nose spiritually and physically and mentally and emotionally. In every which way, he's just been paying the piper. And we just figured it felt right for him to get away. It would have been such a bummer for us, as the first fans of the show, for Jesse to have to pay for his life ultimately. What happens next? We always felt that the viewers desired Jesse to get away, and it's up to the individual viewer to decide what happens next for Jesse. Some people might think, well, he'll probably just get 2 miles down the road before the cops nailed him, but I prefer to believe that he got away, and he's got a long road to recovery ahead, in a sense of being held prisoner in a dungeon for the last 6 months, and being beaten to within the inch of his life, and watching Andrea be shot. All these terrible things he's witnessed are going to scar him as well, but the romantic in me wants to believe that he got away, that he gets away with it, and moves to Alaska and has a peaceful life communing with nature. So there you go. I mean, that's the man himself telling us what he thinks is going to happen. And I do believe Jesse really is one of the most tragic characters in the show. That and Walt Jr., because if you really think about it, Jesse became more of a son to Walt than Walt Jr. Walt Jr. really just gets... it's such a sad story watching. He's always constantly just trying to help his dad when he thinks it's the gambling addiction and just be there for him. And Walt just has no patience for it. And it's just so sad to watch. And Walt Jr. is a character that I wonder, is that resolved? I don't know. Whatever happens to him. Although that's something I want to see longer term. I don't know if I want to see that right immediately after. What happens to Walt Jr. years later? Interesting idea for sure to revisit. But this idea of where did Jesse go? Look, I trust in Vince Gilligan just like everybody else, just like Aaron Paul does. I think if he had felt the need to tell something, let's give him a shot and see where it goes. I'm a fan of Better Call Saul. I think it's a really great show. Bob Odenkirk, everyone in that cast is fantastic. And so I am excited to see where this goes. Vince has said in that article and other things, this is not just like a casual movie. This is a movie that, yes, will play to casual audiences, but it's really for the Breaking Bad fans. So you have about a week, everybody. No, actually a little bit more than a week, October 11th. You got a couple weeks, so you have time to try and catch up, or at least go to see some premieres on YouTube. Catch up on your Breaking Bad, get ready, get situated, because I think we're in for a treat October 11th when El Camino pulls into all of our Netflix queues, or if you go theatrically on October 11th or 13th to see. Like I said, please subscribe. That way you can be notified when I do some more content about Breaking Bad and other awesome things, or hit me up on social media at Andy Signor. I look forward to breaking this down with you, and we'll be live tonight every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about some of this kind of stuff and much more. So please stay tuned, and thanks so much for joining me. Have an awesome day, everybody. Bye!